Good afternoon to everybody. My name is Shakti Sinha. I'm the director of the Atal Bihari Vajpayee Institute for Policy Research and International Studies at the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda at Vadodara. Institution which is starting on, and we decided that in the series of webinars that we are doing, we have three more of the present series left. One, of course, is since we are both public policy and international studies, we do alternately one from public policy, where we have introduction economic governance, other we do international studies. We had a fair amount, a good response. We are generally targeting young and upcoming scholars who have proven their mettle. We think that this is the right moment for us to be talking to them. Or in few cases, we have got people really at top of the line. So we're combining both experience as well as very young talent, which is bringing in fresh insights into the subjects. And we've had very good quality seminars. I think by and large, people have expressed their satisfaction. I've got lots of compliments. I'm happy to accept, even though my job is just to spot the right people and rather than do anything myself. And as I said, we have done lots now. We have three more to go. As an example, next week we have next Friday, we'll be speaking on Kashmir, public finance in Kashmir. Next Friday. Friday after that, that'll be by Dipankar Gupta, a very good economist at the University of Jammu. Week after that, we have Harsh Pant speaking on global power shifts. And 30th, we have Ila Patnaik, again, a very sound economist, doing Atmanirbhar Bharat. We also doing discussions. Leaving that aside, coming back to today's thing. Our speaker today is Antara Ghosal Singh at the Center for Social and Economic Progress. Earlier, what was known as Brookings India. She has been at the Delhi Policy Group, National Maritime Foundation, and IDSA. And I first came across her work last year, really, my ignorance, when she talked about, and today that's what she's going to expound on it further. You know, we think of China, the People's Republic of China, the Communist Party of China, as one large, undistinguished whole. Actually, there are lots of discussions there, especially with the Chinese media. We tend to read the English media, which is what they want us to hear. We actually read the Chinese media. We really see lots of discussions where she talked about on the Galwan post-Ladakh. Galwan is just one small thing, but post-Ladakh, after the Ladakh started, is how in China there were two discourses running. One side, hardline as she calls it, somebody, including one person whom I have very great regard for, as somebody who understands India very well, which is Zhang Jiadong at the Fudan University. He's a realist, he's a Chinese nationalist, but when I see him write on India, I think he has a good sense of India. He has taken a stand which Indians do not like, but that is fine, he's a Chinese nationalist. On the other hand, there are other Chinese who feel that China must try to accommodate India. And therefore, you know, this kind of healthy debate happening in Chinese society is something most Indians are not familiar with. And Antara did a couple of very good pieces on that. And really it struck me that, you know, these are the kind of things on China that Indians should be exploring more, which is why we invited her. I see from her CV that she's both studied in the mainland China, right? Tsinghua University, School of Public Policy, and at the Taiwan, in the National Central University. In fact, if you show your passport to People's Republic of China, which has a Taiwan stamp on it, they're not very happy about it, but she seems to have done it. She's did both places. So let's not take more time. Welcome all of you, particularly welcome Antara, and ask her to take the floor and speak for about 25 or so minutes, Antara. I'll leave it to you, 25, 30, and then we can open up for discussion. Over to you. And can I request everybody to mute themselves? Because sometimes 1 out of 50 persons, there's background sound, which completely disturbs the mood of the session, you know. And since our speakers have by and large been very good, it's not very fair to disturb them. So just a request to everybody, please mute yourself. Antara, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, organizers, especially Shakti sir, for inviting me for today's discussion, for providing me this very important platform to share my humble views and opinions on a topic as critical as China-India relations. It is really an honor for me to be here today. And as you know already, the theme of my presentation. Can you see my screen? Uh, can you see
Complete
the screen?
screen, Antara. If you go down and use the complete screen, we'll miss out the
Okay.
sidebar and the top things.
Okay.
Right at the bottom on the right side, possibly there you can do the full screen. You can only see 3/4 of the screen. 3/4 is wasted in inserted design and translation.
Okay. Is it okay now?
Yes,
Yes.
perfect, perfect,
Okay.
perfect,
Great. Okay. So,
perfect.
as you know, that the theme of my presentation for today is China's strategic discourse on India at the backdrop of the LSE crisis. Initially, I thought of highlighting just the Chinese discourse on a series of issues, rising out of or exacerbated by the ongoing border crisis, like the Tibet issue, the South Asia question, the US factor, and the issue of decoupling between Chinese and Indian economy. But then, to provide a better and a more balanced perspective, I thought of putting forward both the Chinese and the Indian discourse side by side on these critical issues, and then highlight the mismatch or the disjoint between the Chinese and the Indian way of thinking. But there's a fallout of this change in plan. My PPT might be slightly longer, so please feel free to stop me wherever needed. Uh, so, so let's start with the Tibet issue. So, as we know that recently, Prime Minister Modi greeted the 14th Dalai Lama on his 86th birthday on July 6th, which created quite a stir in India and beyond, and was largely interpreted as India's strong message to China amidst worsening ties. The Tibet issue indeed play a very important role in the 2020 border crisis, which makes it rather imperative to ask the question: what is India's approach to Tibet, and how does it compare with China's approach towards Tibet? So, going by Indian strategic community, Tibet is often seen as the core of China-India territorial dispute. Some would rather argue that China's insecurity or concern about Tibet or the Dalai Lama is very real, very big, and is central to all kinds of mistrust that is there between China and India. Um, it is also believed in India that security of Tibet or integration of Tibetan community uh, tops Chinese agenda while they interact with South Asia as a whole and India, together with India. Um, while some within Indian strategic community would argue that India should use the Tibet card more prominently, more often as a deterrent against China's hostility towards India. Meanwhile, many others are there who are of the opinion that India needs to reassure China on the Tibet issue, convince it that India doesn't support separatism within China, and thereby desist from antagonizing or further agitating China over the Tibet issue. So now let's see what is China's approach towards Tibet. So a look at Chinese language literature, Chinese journal articles or what Chinese scholars have been talking on Tibet, it appears that China approaches Tibet not so much from the territorial perspective, but more so from its maritime strategy perspective, as an important strategic component of China's management of the Indian Ocean. Um, in the new situation, particularly after the launch of the Belt and Road Initiative, Chinese strategists feel that it is not sufficient to see Tibet or China's western frontier solely through the prism of national stability or border security. Therefore, Tibet is lesser and lesser being seen as a national security barrier between China, India, and the rest of South Asia, and more as a new hub for developing closer relations between China and South Asia, particularly India, connecting the Chinese and Indian economy, and developing a trans-Himalayan growth zone for China. The big task for Tibet is to construct the South Asia Grand Corridor, which is actually a confluence of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, China-Nepal-India Trans-Himalayan Corridor, and Bangladesh-India, China-Myanmar Economic, the BCIM Corridor. And all these are, meant to safeguard Chinese interest and activities in the Indian Ocean region. So it is this new geostrategic role for Tibet that has necessitated China to build, these border villages, townships, border ports or markets, or developing, cultural industries, eco conservation parks, or tourist destinations in the border region. The main idea is to give equal emphasis on garrisoning troops and local people, better integrating military and civilian aspects, and using a mass line approach to secure dual purposes. One, that is guarding the border, and second is simultaneously integrating China into South Asia and the Indian Ocean region. So clearly we can see that China and India are not so much on the same page on Tibet. So now let's move to the next question of South Asia. So there is of late there have been, not of late, it has been people are writing about how China's growing presence in India's neighborhood, in India's backyard, has been making India uncomfortable. With the pandemic and the border conflict, the border issue has further intensified India's anxiety over China's foray into India's neighborhood. There is also a constant lament, in Indian policy circles, that despite India's massive outreach to South Asian nations, its introduction of a high-profile, neighborhood first policy, China is somehow still winning away hearts in South Asia, and India somehow losing the plot in its own neighborhood. There is also a debate in Indian policy circles about if there is a need for India to adopt a more conciliatory, accommodative, non-reciprocal attitude towards its neighbors, show more economic largesse to kind of wean them away from China, or India needs to deal with them more from the position of strength and clearly lay down its red lines. So that is the debate in Indian policy circles. And now let's see what Chinese concerns are on South Asia. It is interesting that when I see Chinese literature, I can see that China is also equally concerned about South Asia. So there is a lament, in Chinese policy circles also, that although it wants, as much as it wants to kind of to erode India's influence in South Asia, to make South Asian countries less dependent on India or set them on a collision course with India, but it still is not able to have its way in this subcontinent. And it still has to kind of take into consideration India's sensitivity to a certain extent, and exercise restraint on its own, and all this despite being the fact that it is a more powerful country, and its economy is bigger and military is stronger and all that thing. So why does China need to care about Indian sensitivities or concerns in
Yourself.
Am I
Antara, for 20 seconds you were muted.
Oh,
Why
okay.
China? Yeah.
So should I start from Chinese concerns over South Asia?
20 seconds, but 10, 20 words you were muted. Go ahead.
Okay.
Don't worry.
That's fine then. Okay, fine, fine. So, I was talking about like why does China feels this need to be, somewhat, to take care of Indian sensitivities to certain extent, or to consider India's, interest in the region to whatever extent it thinks it is doing. Is it a shared goodwill gesture, or it is national interest? I would argue it's plain national interest, because India remains deeply ingrained in China's Belt and Road plans for South Asia. Um, China has always hoped for, and it still hopes for, having India as a key partner in Belt and Road Initiative. It is not surprising that all of China's high-profile projects in South Asia includes India and Indian market, either in its present form or in its future plans. Even the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which we officially object to, has plans to incorporate India and tap its market in the future. Um, it is well understood in Beijing that India's acceptance of Belt and Road Initiative can secure Chinese gains of vital geopolitical and economic consequences, and its non-cooperation or hostility can pose the biggest hurdle to China's South Asia strategy and its advancement of its Indian Ocean footprints. Um, Given the geography of South Asia, the asymmetric power structure, the various levels of dependencies of South Asian countries on India, it is felt in China that it is difficult for China to sidestep or to replace India in the South Asian context. China's own experience of working with multi-party democratic systems of various South Asian countries also have been far from gratifying. The toll that China-India competition generates on China's cooperation projects with various South Asian nations, the perennial cycle of negotiation, delay, renegotiation, and price rise uh, have often led many Chinese strategists, somewhat frustrated, and they have wondered that if it is even worthwhile to engage in such a costly battle with India for allies in South Asia. In fact, if you see the dominant view in China, it is about being little bit more sensitive to India's concerns, and it is all about cooperation with New Delhi under various frameworks like China-India plus one model. Those kind of models are there which they prefer, and they believe that that is the most viable option for China for a hassle-free and cost-effective implementation of Beijing, South Asia, and Indian Ocean strategy. So that is about China's, discourse on South Asia. So let's move to um, one second. Yeah. So let's move to the US factor. Most analysis on China, India, US triangle, both within India and beyond, including China's propaganda outlets like Global Times, they often focus on one key argument that China doesn't see India as a peer competitor today, unlike it used to in the 50s or 60s. The case of India is often used as a negative example for China, uh, given the power asymmetry and the perception of misgovernance or incompetence, in the name of democracy. Both Indian and international scholars, have already argued that there is an asymmetric threat perception in China-India ties, where India's threat perception towards China is rather acute, but China remains somewhat indifferent or ambivalent towards India. In fact, India, hardly figures in Chinese strategic calculations. So believes, many strategists, many China watchers, both in India and outside. Therefore, it is argued that China only sees India through the prism of its own strategic competition with the United States, and this factor, this seeing India through the prism of United States, has led to various concerns within India about what happens if the competition between China and the United States eases. Uh, is moving closer to the United States the only choice before India? So these are the questions regarding the US factor that we often come across in the Indian setting. So let's see what is the Chinese discourse on this factor. Um, Actually, when I read the Chinese literature, I see a very different story in this domain. In the Chinese assessment, among all the big countries, India is the only one which has the capability to balance China. And these are not my words. I'm just quoting one of the Chinese diplomats who have been posted in India and now is associated with a leading Chinese think tank. So why does he say so? He argues that given its geographic location and its military strength, India in a worst case situation does have the ability to block the Strait of Malacca or choke China's energy lifeline and even threaten China's overseas military and commercial establishments in the Indian Ocean region. And therefore, he further argues that India will remain the US's best choice to check and balance China, even if the competition between China and the United States eases out in the future. India is not just critical to US's China policy, but it is also critical to China's US policy. Apart from India's central role in China's Belt and Road Initiative, which I just explained in my previous slides, India is also crucial to China's hedging strategy against the US's free and open Indo-Pacific and Quad. India has been particularly valued by a section within Chinese strategic community because it is the only fulcrum country that is not an ally of the United States and therefore has a unique room for maneuver. Uh, it is believed that if India actively participates, then the Indo-Pacific with the quadrilateral security mechanism at its core becomes a reality. And if India relents, then Indo-Pacific again goes to the back burner. Even in the post-Galwan scenario, there have been strong voices within China who have been advocating against pushing India further to the US camp or publicly admitting India as an adversary. Because in the Chinese assessment, an openly hostile India can drastically deteriorate China's overall security environment and prevent China from putting its entire focus and its best resources in the direction of the United States and its alliance system as necessitated by its global strategy. Um, as we know that China has multiple fronts in the East, the South China Sea, the East China Sea, Korean Peninsula, the Taiwan issue. There is also a Russian front, which is of course dormant, but China was not happy when Russia, agreed to supply arms to India in the middle of China-India border standoff. Then there are various challenges, internal challenges, Tibet, Xinjiang, and other issues. So overall, it is often argued in China that any open spat with India is detrimental to China's national interest as it sends a wrong message to various of China's adversaries who might seek to exploit the situation and take more radical actions against China in various domains. Uh, India is therefore, increasingly seen as a major variable, is what the Chinese say, in China's global strategy or a key determinant of its strategic gain against the United States. So next we move to the topic of China-India economic decoupling. So the retaliatory economic measures taken against China after the Galwan crash has actually initiated a debate in China, in India, about the merits of economic decoupling from China. There are many questions going round regarding this. The most important being, is it even possible for India to decouple from Chinese economy? If yes, then at what cost? Further, given India's decision to stay away from RCEP and also not being not considering joining the CPTPP, questions are being raised. If India is staring at an economic isolation in the region, is India getting more and more inward, and what are the consequences of such an inward-looking policy? So now let's see how China is seeing this decoupling thing that is happening. I see that in China there is also huge concern about this decoupling between Chinese and Indian economy. Um, 1 second. Yeah. So opening up Indian economy or forming a new trans-Himalayan economic growth zone under the Belt and Road Initiative has always been a long-term objective of China, as I explained in my earlier slides. Although India's economic measures might not be hurting China that bad in the short term, but Indian market is often considered as a blue ocean for Chinese capital and technology, and therefore the trend of decoupling is seen detrimental to the long-term interest of Chinese companies going out strategy. A bigger concern regarding this is if geoeconomics fail, then it will only be geopolitics governing China-India relations, leaving China very little room for maneuver. The Chinese side is anxious that if, under geopolitical consideration, India, while decoupling from China, manages to forge closer economic ties with other global economic power centers, it will be an additional trouble for China, particularly since it is facing the trend of decoupling from various directions. Um, Particularly, a combination of US technology, Japanese capital, and Indian labor under the Indo Pacific strategy is often seen as a potential threat to China's position in many global supply chains. And hence, China has been emphasizing on keeping the economic ties between China and India intact, despite the crisis at the LSE. So, to conclude, I would argue that in our analysis of China-India relations, we often tend to overemphasize on the power differential or the power asymmetry between China and India, uh, with little regard to the other aspects of the relationship. While the power differential is a hard reality in China-India relations, but as I have just shown in this presentation, China-India relation is also emerging as a key determinant of China's global strategy. There is no doubt about the fact that China is a formidable adversary, but we also need to consider that this formidable adversary also have formidable challenges, and it requires India's cooperation on various occasions to override some of these challenges. So I would argue that as long as we choose to see China-India relation only through the prism of power differential, we will continue to find ourselves at disadvantage with very limited options. But when we consider the importance of this relationship to China's national interest and the value that a good China-India relationship can bring to China, then we can see a very different picture and a very different equation between the two countries. So I would like to stop here and thank you very much for your kind attention.
Antara, if you could stop sharing screen there, we could
Okay, sorry.
see. Yeah, no issue. No, thank you very, very much. Very succinct. And I think you brought out the complexities involved on both sides very well. Because we tend to either see it very linearly, one with the other. Now, those who want to raise questions, please either raise your hands or put it in the chat box. So is the question I can see from Pinku Jha, so I'm keeping my question aside, which says, is there any scope for success of China, India plus one cooperation model? Does any possibility that China would work with cooperation? In other words, yes, it's a theoretical proposition. How much do you think in terms of success or potentiality for success is there? That I think is the question from Pikuja.
Okay, should I answer or should I wait?
Yeah, please answer it. Others, please raise your hands or post your questions.
I would say that cooperation with China, India plus one cooperation model has been proposed by China, and it has a lot of Chinese strategists actually promote this model, they support this model, and they think this is the right way to go. But then when it comes to India, to have this kind of cooperation, we need to have better negotiation with China probably. You cannot have problems at the border and then expect to have cooperation, say, at any level, right? So maybe peace and tranquility needs to be the basic minimum in China-India relations to have any sort of cooperation anywhere. And I think that is pretty much what the Indian stance has been throughout this border conflict or the border the standoff that is going on since last 1 year.
That, while before, we've always seen ourselves as drawing some red lines. The first red line, of course, was that Tibet is a part of the Republic of China, going back earlier days, then Vajpayee's visit, which actually extended the definition of Tibet in one way. Leaving that aside, but within China, though what you told us is, yes, China requires India's cooperation in many which ways, so there's still lots of issues. Mostly in the Chinese opinion, there is a tendency to, one, disregard India for the points that you raise. You're a chaotic country, you don't perform well, your governance is in shambles, economically you're far behind, you're a poor country, etc. But despite that, you really, because we are a neighbor with a long border, do you really see they see that as also, in one sense, outweighing the India's disadvantages as they see it?
Sir, while looking at Chinese discourses or how Chinese strategists argue, one challenge I often face is, it's very difficult to separate what is a say propaganda, a distractionary tactic, and what is the real strategy. At times, you'll start believing what they are saying as the strategy, but that is not the strategy. That is just a propaganda, and that is just a distractionary tactic. And the more you read those, Chinese journal articles or Chinese books, or so. Once in a while you will just find that one sentence which actually reveals the strategy. So that is one challenge that I often face while reading Chinese articles. So the entire thing about India being we don't care about India, or India is lesser than us, or whatever, what are all these arguments, I would categorize them as a part of China's distractionary tactic. They just do not want to admit, they are equally threatened by India, but then they do not want to show it as a threat, because that kind of deteriorates its entire security situation. That is one of the reasons why they do not want to publicly project India as a threat to China's interests. It is totally it is a distraction technique. Even in South Asia, if you see India, if you look at Chinese articles, you can figure out that India is at the core of China's Belt and Road strategy, but they will never admit it. The strategy here is to promote other projects in other countries in South Asia. So in a way, it builds up pressure on India. If you highlight too much about China-Pakistan corridor, or China-Myanmar corridor, or say China-Nepal corridor, it builds up pressure on India, right? So that is the technique, to build up pressure and to force India to cooperate, so that it's just a distraction. And because they think that if they tell India that it is important, then India will, it is kind of, they feel that India will act even pricier, and it will be difficult for them to tackle this relationship. So that is a strategy that they use.
Kotaria, to raise this question, I just reminded of a seminar I attended 15 years, 20 years ago in the USA. By this American scholar, she was also part of the administration, Susan somebody, can't remember her name, said that China doesn't, Susan Shakwa, sorry. She said that China doesn't care about India at all. And a person in the audience said, so how come they have a pamphlet calling 5,000 years of China-Pakistan relationship when there was no Pakistan? So Ashish, over to you, your question.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you so much. This is Ashish Kotodia from the Department of Political Science. Ma'am, I wanted to ask you in context of his recently, the Communist Party of China has completed a centenary as a, a commencement of the Communist Party of China. But do you think that completely decoupling of Indian economy with the China, is it possible? As the India is right now emerging a very prominent leader of the Quad group, and China, while on the respondent to much emphasize on the especially the RCEP. So do you think it is completely possible to decoupling the Indian economy? And the second question, that recently the many people said that China's especially the we had some conflict as a line of actual control, especially China's interference at the Tawang region of the Arunachal Pradesh, and the 2017 Doklam conflict. It is all about the China is trying to showing the world that we are trying to imbibing the wolf warrior diplomacy and show the world that we will never allow any foreign force to bully, press or subjugate us, and anyone who would attempt to do so, then we will crush them, and the great wall of the steel built, as Xi Jinping said in his presidential address.
Right, that's true. And there are a lot of writings about China's wolf warrior diplomacy and all that. But I think there is also a lot of concern within China about an unprecedented deterioration in China's external environment and its relation with so many countries. And I think in January or February, Chinese officials, they held like Le Yucheng, if you remember, he was Chinese ambassador to India before the present ambassador. So I think he is now the foreign. Anyway, he had to he held a press conference just explaining it to Chinese people that it is not what it appears, and China's circle of friends are increasing, and it is not like it is. Everybody is up in arm against China. So I think there is a lot of concern within China about the deterioration, the deterioration of the external situation. So yeah, that is. I don't know if it answers your question. So, and that kind of makes them even more defensive.
Right, more defensive. I see some questions in the chat box, so I'll leave the hands for a moment. I'll take up two questions in the chat box. One is continuation of what you're answering. We see China-India relation has been deteriorated due to border conflict. Which strategy has been taken on by both sides in enhancing their former relations? One. And two is, do you see the communist ideology as a factor in India-China relations? Do you see scope for improvement of India? So basically, India-China deterioration, how do you mitigate it? Communism, does it exist actually? And scope for improvement. And then we take the others. Okay. So Megan, Ayushi will wait for you after this. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, as much as I can see, reconciliation is going to be difficult from both sides because it has become such a big issue now. Both sides, just reaching out to each other is difficult. But then what I could see from Chinese writings is there is a lot of interest in maintaining a workable relationship, a basic relationship with India. As I told you, having having India as projecting India as an adversary is detrimental to Chinese interests. So it is important for them to have even a basic relationship with India, where it is not it is not a declared adversary. It doesn't stand I mean, it doesn't distinctly stand with, say, China's marked adversaries. So it is very important for them to have this basic relationship, this basic workable relationship with India.
Please unmute yourself, ask a question.
Am I audible, sir? Hello?
Yes, yes.
All
Yeah.
right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. My question to you, ma'am, is wishing His Holiness on his birthday too little too late? Can we call India's lack of clarity on the Tibet issue a classic example of strategic ambiguity or one of strategic folly? And the second question is, how do you see India-China relationship panning out with the background of maritime security and energy routes taking precedence? So how will you see this, especially in the context of Indian Ocean and South China Sea? Thank you.
Right. How China is approaching India, as I told you, the case of Tibet, we generally see Tibet from the perspective of territorial dispute between China and India. But China sees it in a completely different way. It sees it as a part of their maritime strategy. So it is a place where its territorial and maritime strategy is merging, So I think that is probably a lesson also for us to relook at how we have been looking at Tibet, because their strategy is to have Tibet as the center for as the center governing kind of looking into how things are happening, or deciding how things are happening in the Indian Ocean region, or for protecting or safeguarding Chinese interest in the Indian Ocean region. So China is approaching India in a land-sea coordinated way. So I think we should also, and I'm sure we are also having, we are already having these kind of ideas in our policy making, where we need to approach China in a more coordinated land-sea approach. I'm hoping we already have this in mind while approaching China.
There's a question from Rutvi Dattani. Why are we thinking only of the Indo-Pacific and the USA? What is the feasibility of India's alliance with island nations that incessantly face the assertion of Chinese sovereignty in the Indian Ocean and the South China Seas, in spite of the fact that trade has gone up between China and these nations? I wish, Rutvi, you had been a little specific on what you meant by island nations in South China Seas, but I'll leave the ambiguity for to Antara to decipher.
Right. I think, Indo-Pacific, because Indo-Pacific is one concept. Although China never admits it, you will hardly see Chinese policymakers, commenting on Indo-Pacific. I think last Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, he commented on Indo-Pacific in 2018, and then he commented on Indo-Pacific this year, 2020. So, and last time he commented was it's like a ocean foam, and it will just disappear. It will appear and disappear. So Indo-Pacific is something that China is really worried about. It sees it as a big threat to its national interest, and that's why probably Indo-Pacific, it kind of takes all the limelight, because it is a direct threat. China feels it as a direct threat to its national interest. So
To interrupt, Antara, basically, no. The question focus was on why doesn't India align with the island nations of South China Seas and in the Indian Ocean? Yes, island nations. South China Sea island nations, Philippines, Taiwan is an island nation. Indian Ocean,
okay.
Sri Lanka,
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. India, I don't think we have any alliance with anybody, but we cooperate with everyone from that perspective. And even with the United States, we do not have an alliance, but we kind of, it's an issue-based, cooperation with different countries. So with Taiwan, I think, we do have common interest, and we should kind of, have more interaction, have more cooperation with these countries. But I don't think India has this tradition of alliances to become an alliance partner with other countries. So maybe that is one of the issues. We don't ally with other countries, but we do have close cooperation with many countries.
Meg Kalyan Sundaram, please go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Namaste. Yeah. Namaste, Antara. I've lived in China for about 9 years, primarily in Shanghai, and then I've traveled to about 30 cities. I've been following your work, and I'd be curious to hear from you if you've seen any quantitative research which is reasonably representative of the factor of unity amongst the people in China vis-a-vis unity in India. And if you haven't come across any quantitative published work on that, I would like to hear your personal qualitative opinion, if you have one, on how you perceive the unity amongst the people at large.
Okay, thank you. I haven't come across, because I haven't researched too deeply on China's, say, communities or internal, the how do you say, the internal security aspect of China as much. So I cannot say for sure if there is any authoritative, quantitative, research or study available on China's minority situation or the relation between majority minority community, because I haven't studied that aspect so much. But I can say from my own experience of living and studying in China, and my professor of international relation at Tsinghua University, he was actually a Manchu, so he is one of from one of the minority communities in China. And I also met a lot of people from Xinjiang in Tsinghua University who get some kind of what do I say, scholarships to study in best universities in China. So my experience has been from studying from like what I heard from them and what I kind of learned from them. And but the thing is, even in Chinese universities, it is very regulated. Like in Chinese classrooms, there will be big cameras installed, so I mean, although they encourage you to talk as much as you want, whatever you want, but then still there is some kind of I don't know. I mean, people feel little, I think, uncomfortable to open up or to be very frank about whatever they feel or whatever they believe. So my interaction with my professor has been he was, I think he was one of the strongest nationalists in China. Very hardcore views about Chinese nationalism. But I think that comes from the fact that he is a minority, he belongs to a minority community, and and he needs to kind of prove his, or he needs to kind of show how, his allegiance to his country's principles or values. So maybe from that aspect, I'm not very sure if I have answered your question, but my interaction or my understanding of China's dealing with its minorities has been totally personal and totally on individual basis. So I'm not sure if I can give you a very authentic answer about the status of minority in China.
Thank you. I didn't particularly mean to pattern it as majority or minority, because that opens up a completely different dimension of thinking about it. It was more about a qualitative perspective of just the sense of unity and the sense of patriotism, and not being stuck about particularly values that might not affect one's daily lives. So, but I appreciate your forthrightness. Thank you. That was useful.
Two questions which are more or less overlapping. One is Antara about is that the main reason with the conflictual relationship, basically it's about the land of control. Aksai Chin is based on Johnson Line, Arunachal on McMahon Line, Canada was not then Shimla. Will LSE continue as a conflict? Basically, that is the two questions. I'm combining them to one. So will the LSE continue because of differing perceptions? is what I can make of the questions.
Can I answer?
Please.
Okay. So I think, I think the LSE is what I read from Chinese literature is that, or what Chinese scholars are writing is about, a continuous seesaw between the forces of India and China for another 4 5 years maybe, till LSE is kind of hammered out from that seesaw between the forces, and yeah, that is what most of them are predicting. Normalizing border conflict, but at the same time having a workable relationship with India. Did I answer your question?
I think Sakti sir is disconnected.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry, I had muted myself.
Okay, sir.
In my sorry, my apologies. The question was: do Indian students in China face any discrimination or difference since you studied in China?
No,
Peters.
it was very good. They are very welcoming to. I had a very good the Chinese university. Their hostel for foreign students are really good. They really help you. They really kind of take care of you. But that is for mostly for the foreign students, and that is a part of their Chinese influence project. For this, what we call it the Chinese influence project, and that is how they. I mean, you feel so nice about China that it kind of the memory lasts with you long. When you go, even when you come back. So it is a very good experience that I had in China.
Good. All of it. There's a question I missed somehow. If India is so important strategically, China's recent aggression is beyond comprehension. What can be the reason behind it? And then Ashish, after that, you can ask the same question. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, I was saying that cooperation with China is not actually a fleeting, a passing trend in China. It is something which has been determined at the highest level by the National Congress, and say long back, like 5, 6, 10 years back. But the thing is, there is a disagreement within Chinese strategic community about how to carry out that cooperation. So one aspect is like China can cooperate with India through. I mean, it can induce India into cooperation by kind of providing non-core economic incentives to China. But the other view is that China needs to force India to cooperate, and that comes from Mao's idea of cooperation through struggle. I mean, the cooperation that you get through struggle is the cooperation that lasts very long. But the cooperation that you get through compromise, that kind of fades away soon. So the person who, when you compromise, the person will again come back asking for something else. To you to compromise. So that is a philosophy, or that is an idea that is there, that is pretty strong over there. So the cooperation is there. That's a strategic goal, objective. But how to get that cooperation done? Should it induce India to cooperate, or should it force India to cooperate? That is that is the two lines of thinking in China.
Tough love, as they call it. Ashish wanted to ask another question, I think. Ashish, are you still there?
Yes,
please go
sir.
ahead.
Sorry to asking the second question, sir. Yes, sir. Ma'am, I want to ask you in context of history of the China. Ma'am, as we have seen that there were 3 leaders from Mao Zedong to Deng Xiaoping and Xi Jinping. And especially when Mao Zedong, introduced the cultural revolution or the great leap forward policies of the people communes, and then after the Deng Xiaoping's open door economic policies. But right now, the Xi Jinping's policy of the Great China Dream, how you look at this policy? Because as we have seen since last, past several around 5 to 6 years, China is trying to, creating the economic imperialism among the East Asian tiger economic. So how do you think this entire, scenario about the China's economic imperialism?
Mm, this Chinese dream, and they are really very. I mean, we may call it imperialism or whatever, but then they are very serious about this dream of China becoming the top power, and they are very far-sighted in their policies. Like I was talking about Tibet and their maritime approach of Tibet. That has been there for so long. I could see Chinese articles dated say 2005, 2006 onwards, when they were talking about having a South Asia corridor through Tibet, like Tibet being the fulcrum of a South Asia corridor for China. So they have these long-term policies and they work towards it. So I think this, and they believe in kind of becoming the top power in the world, and it is kind of it believes in competition between nations, and it wants to be at the top. So that is their overall long-term policy that they are following. So yes, it might be imperialism, it might be based on imperialism, it might be based on whatever, but then that is their policy and that is what they are following.
I have one more person who I would like to ask. Is there nobody else? May I request Jal Narsimhan to speak for a couple of minutes?
Thank you very much, Dr. Sakti Sinha. It's nice to see you after a long time with a long beard, of course. So that is interesting. And thanks, Antara, for a very good presentation and taking on those questions. I just want to add on a few issues which she talked about to clarify a few issues. The problem that we find is what she said about don't push India into USA's hands, the voices that she sees in the Chinese writings. There are two aspects to it. One aspect is that the number of voices that speak in that particular tone is actually less than the ones which are actually opposing it. So that is one thing that we need to keep in mind. The second thing is there is also writings which we have seen in the Chinese language media and otherwise to say that since you have opened up too many fronts, that since China has opened up too many fronts, you need to make some friendships or improve the relations with Japan and India. This kind of writings also we have been seeing. So this is something that I thought I'll leave it for the audience to think about. The second thing is on India not joining the BRI and China having hopes of India joining BRI. I don't see that in our dialogues which we do with many of the think tanks across. So I think over a period of time there seems to be a realization that India is unlikely to join the BRI at least in the foreseeable future. I think that is something which has gone across very clearly. On the boundary issue, there were a couple of questions on what strategy, etc. The strategy only seems to be that the line of actual control, I think Chinese wanted to fix it to their claim lines. That seems to be the basically what we call as unilaterally changing the status of line of actual control. So that seems to have been the idea. The other thing is when we say that territorial integrity and sovereignty are the ones that should be a prerequisite for maintaining or improving the bilateral relationship, they do understand that. But then the reaction is actually very muted to that. So this is something they keep saying that you must keep the boundary issue in its own place and we should actually move the relationship on the other fronts is what they keep saying. That is something that I think wantonly they do it. They understand our position, but I think they have a different position on it. On the decoupling, there was a question and also the Gulf War diplomacy. Decoupling, everybody is clear that decoupling cannot happen overnight. That is, nobody is under an illusion that you can just disengage and go. It doesn't happen. The thing that we need to do is to build our capacities and capabilities within the country over a period of time so that some amount of decoupling or majority amount of decoupling can be achieved over a period of time. On the wolf warrior diplomacy, if you look at it, it was at its height about a year ago. But that wolf warrior diplomacy seems to have reduced itself in some form. There are two reasons for that. One, during the party congress, Mr. Xi Jinping has made a statement that we need to make China lovable to others. So that message will go out to the diplomats in some form or the other. They are likely to soften the reactions. Second thing is, they also laid out a plan to become a soft power superpower by 2035. So if you want to be a soft power superpower by 2035 and you pursue a wolf warrior diplomacy, they don't go hand in hand. So you need to actually then remodel your diplomacy. So that is something that we need to keep in mind. There was a question on LAC, whether it will continue till 2030, whether it will continue. I get a feeling it will continue till the time you either fix the LAC or go for a resolution of the boundary. Both don't seem to be happening in the near future. And so the answer is the LAC kind of situation, we should be prepared and we should be careful on the line of actual control. On the island nation, the last point, the island nation, there was a question. See, we don't go into alliances like what Antara said. I'm fully with her on that. We don't go for those kind of alliances, etc. But that does not mean that we do not do things with Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia. Malaysia, we have a little bit of an issue. Vietnam, etc. So I think the relationship with these countries actually has improved over a period of time, and that is actually working to our advantage within the ASEAN countries. I'll stop here. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Of course, you did not mention the unmentionable island nation, that we leave it at that. But yes, we obviously would have to keep our options open. I think that is very clear. So, you mentioned Xi Jinping's statement to the party congress, but his statement to the parade that wearing a Mao uniform, no doubt, saying that bloodied nose and so they go together. The bloodied nose, the tough love goes together with the soft face. So that is obviously, we've had a very lovely audience. I can see very respected professionals, Chairperson Institute of Chinese Studies, Admiral Shekhar Sinha, Ashok Sajjanal was here. I can see Krishna Varma. It's been a very, very nice to have all of you listening for such a long time. Normally, people tend to drop off by the 45th minute. I think we've had 90% going even now after an hour plus. I think, Anta, that's very nice. It's a very important topic. And before I hand you over to, I see no hands, no questions. So before I hand you over to our joint director, just to express that I think you raised some very important points, and especially the complexity of it. We should not see China as a simple binary. The fact that there are discussions in China, the fact that different points are taken, whether it is between the Mr. Lee or some of my good friends, Zhang Jiadong, they do take different positions and they take it fairly openly nowadays. So one should sense that, like anywhere else, of course different, they do have these kinds of things moving around. But yes, I agree with El Narasimhan. I don't see these problems ending anytime soon. Unlike the Taiwan issue, which they want to solve now, this issue they want to leave it to the next generation. This is happening for the last 2 generations. We are not likely to see the end of this. We'll be as I mentioned at the beginning, next Friday we'll have our economic session, public policy, where Dipankar Sengupta will talk about public investment in Kashmir, the sustainability and the efficiency of it. The week after that, Harsh Pant speaks on global partnerships in India, and 30th, Ila Patnaik speaks on Atmanirbhar Bharat. As I mentioned, we alternate between foreign policy and public policy because our institute has been given the job of working on both these fields. So I'll say my thank you, but I'll wait for Prof. Samir Dholakia to say it on behalf of the institute to all of you. Professor, over to you.
Thank you, Sakti sir. Well, I think I'm reflecting the view of the entire audience present today when I say that it was a wonderful lecture and an equally riveting discussion after the lecture on LAC, on India-China relations. These are always going to be inconclusive because it's a very complex relationship of both cooperation and competition. And Dr. Antara Ghosal Singh tried to touch upon so many dimensions of this relationship, strategic, political, diplomatic, economic, and so on. I express my sincere thanks to Dr. Antara for giving us this opportunity and for setting the tone for a very erudite discussion on India-China relations, the contemporary as well as the futuristic scenario. I also thank all the distinguished personalities whose names were mentioned by Sri Sakti Sinha in his closing remarks. We feel indeed privileged to have such a galaxy of participants from distinguished backgrounds, the armed forces, academia, diplomatic background, and so on. And we look forward to your future inputs, future participation in our activities. Thanks, one and all. And once again, thanks, Dr. Antara, for giving a very erudite presentation today and for sparing your valuable time. Thank you.
In addition to our distinguished people, there's so many so many students I could see. That is also very heartening to see students
Yes.
coming out. That's very, very happy. So thank you, everybody. On behalf of Amit Pai, as already said, thank you. See you soon.
Thank you, sir.